When the sun sets, the world gets a little brighter, as seen through the eyes of an owl, anyway. And minus 10 degrees Celsius really is quite mild if you're an Arctic walrus. But thankfully, for the sake of language, we humans all tend to see, hear, feel, smell, and taste the same things in more or less the same ways. We may have our own cultural, chemical, and genetic filters, which lend a unique sort of lens to our personalized perception, but we are far more alike than we are different, I think you'll agree. We can all tell a somber musical melody from a joyous one. The beauty of a sunrise is distinct from the auspiciousness of a full moon. A rock is distinctly harder than a pillow, the odor of feces fouler than the fragrance of flowers, and cranberries are bitter, not sweet. And because this experience of life is generally common among people, language was built upon this foundation of shared sensory associations. That is all to say that words only work because of our shared experience. But not only is a rock hard, sap sticky, and water wet, eagles and lions are majestic, while pigeons and pigs are common or crude. Children are innocent and pure, while the elderly are encumbered and wise. Winter is harsh, symbolic of scarcity, while summer is warm and full of abundance. Like this, the associations we make increase in complexity and nuance, and as writers, it's our job to exploit these associations in order to convey things in visceral, poignant ways, a symphony of associations, if you will. Here, I use the word symphony to evoke a sense of many little things working together toward the purpose of some grander beauty, as this is how I see words in a novel, and how I want you to see them, too. It's these shared associations that gave rise, as far as I can tell, to literary techniques such as metaphors and similes. For those new to such terms, a simile is an indirect comparison of two things using the word like or as in, the man was heavy as a boulder, whereas a metaphor is a direct comparison, as in, the man was a boulder. In the latter, it's often necessary to provide some context to ensure the reader understands the metaphor. When writing a metaphor or simile, what you're essentially doing is piggybacking on the associations people tend to make regarding one thing and directing those associations toward the thing you're trying to describe. When you write, the plane soared like an eagle, you're piggybacking on the associations we intuitively make with the word eagle, namely something that is majestic and king of the skies, and directing those associations to the plane. You can also change the verb and the metaphor to evoke not only a different visual, but a different feeling in the reader's gut by writing, the plane tumbled through the air like a wounded pigeon. Pigeons are common prey, not majestic predators, and in this context, the word helps to evoke a sense of helplessness. Try to be specific as well, to avoid cliché. For example, you could write the cliché, the man was prickly as a cactus, and people would understand that, myself in particular. I was actually handed this cactus as a gift, eyes closed, and then proceeded to jeez, just pricked myself. Then proceeded to try and feel what it was, to the tune of urgent outcry all around. But to be a little more original, you might write something like, the man's presence enveloped him like an itchy wool sweater, one knit as if for the sole purpose of leaving rashes upon the backs of those who wore it. To anyone who's worn an itchy wool sweater, this man now has a relatable, uncomfortable feeling associated with his presence, and this makes the character's discomfort more distinct and visceral. Let's take a look at a description with and without association, for some contrast. I could write, her mother's love for her was shallow, still love, but not deep like a mother's was supposed to be. But while this describes, it doesn't evoke much, in my opinion. Not like the metaphor, her mother's love for her was a puddle left behind by long since receded tides, water of the ocean, but not an ocean's worth, not like it should have been. This sentence exploits the associations we naturally make with the word puddle. Words like shallow, pitiful, and lonely come to mind, and contrasts them with those of the word ocean, which evokes feelings of depth and vastness. These associations carry a lot of weight beyond just their literal meaning, and when given context, are a great way of conveying difficult to articulate things in concise ways. Concise because a lot of meaning comes wrapped up in a single word. Now, keep in mind that metaphors like this, they tend to lend a poetic feel to your writing, so you just have to decide if that's appropriate for your scene, story, and style. Another way writers exploit associations is through what I would call referencing. This is essentially when writers piggyback on the knowledge that famous stories have impressed upon the collective minds of readers. For example, when you write the word elf, orc, or goblin, the reader is likely to envision the races presented in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, or something similar. Through the use of a single word, elf, let's say, the reader imagines angelic people with long flowing hair and pointy ears, even though the reader didn't describe them at all. And the more other writers use these words, the more sort of narrative baggage they possess. That is to say, the more information these words carry. This can become a hindrance difficult to break free from, but it can also be quite useful. To pack even more meaning behind a single word or phrase, which is sort of like a next level of conciseness, you can even reference entire stories, as is often done with those in the Bible. I'm no biblical scholar, but even I know what you mean when you compare a situation to David and Goliath, or Noah's Ark, or compare a person to a Good Samaritan. Because these stories are commonly known in most Western cultures, the Western reader will associate entire lessons with two simple words, lessons that would ordinarily require an entire story to convey. But since the Bible has already done this heavy lifting, other writers can simply piggyback off of it. Hopefully you're beginning to see how using these collectively understood associations can help you, as a writer, evoke specific and nuanced feelings in your reader. Now, what that feeling is of course dependent on the tone of the scene you're writing and the perspective of the character you're writing from. But it's a tool all the same, one which can even be used to add a unique voice to your character. For example, from the perspective of a farmer, you might write the simile, "The realization struck him like a bat-kicked hoof," or the metaphor, "His heart was a stampede inside his chest." The vast majority of readers won't have any issue making these associations, even if they aren't farmers, because they can likely imagine the thunderous nature of a stampede or the impact of some hoofed animal's kick, and you, as the writer, get the added bonus of lending a unique voice to the narrator or point-of-view character of your story, in this case, that of a farmer. Now, it's important to note that people don't share all associations, because while the sun is warm, night is spooky, water quenches thirst, and almost all other aspects of the natural world are experienced in very similar ways, people themselves are wildcards. We perceive others in all kinds of ways because of how unique and often unpredictable people can be, and we tend to distinguish ourselves and others based on things like culture, gender, race, religion, class, occupation, favorite sports team, or taste in food, any difference we perceive, really. And then, because our brains are wired for pattern recognition, we have a tendency to associate behavioral traits with members of these different groups in an unconscious attempt to try and simplify this complicated world. But I think I'll save the contentious topic of archetypes and prejudice for another time. So, as always, tune in next week for another writing video.